good evening, everyone. Dear members and guests, welcome to our last chapter of the Art and Light series, Vincent Van Gogh. For those who don't know me, I am Barbara Faranik-Matenet, founder and president of the Art Circle. Tonight, we are extremely privileged to have with us Julia Marchand and Margot Bonopera. Julia is a graduate of the Sorbonne and Goldsmith College, London. She is adjunct curator at the Fondation Van Gogh Arles since 2015. Margot is a graduate of l'École du Louvre and the Royal College of Art. She is assistant curator at the Fondation Van Gogh. They will be in conversation with two amazing mediators, Sarah Gutti and Clémence Despois. They will focus on the place of light in pictorial modernity, at the heart of which Vincent Van Gogh plays a central role. Talking about different types of lights, they will retrace an art history turned towards the solar star and the various stories and forms that result from it. It will also be about Arles, where the Dutch artist lived for several months between 1888 and 1889, and where the Fondation Vincent Van Gogh has been established for several years. Before starting, I have a few administrative matters. First of all, so we have put you all on mute. Please remain muted during the whole presentation. And may I ask you to address your question by writing them on the chat function. At the end of the presentation, Sarah and Clémence will ask them for us. Julia, the floor is yours.
Okay, fantastic. Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to talk to you. I'm glad to see you. I mean, I see some of you, but I will try to imagine an audience of mainly women, I assume. And thank you, Barbara, for having us. As you know, it's been a kind of a difficult time because the foundation is closed. And so we find ways to work and to deliver what we know and what we do here at the foundation. And what we do is to talk about Van Gogh, but not only. We talk about Van Gogh and contemporary art. I think it's something that is key to us to emphasize on Van Gogh life and Van Gogh history through the eyes of contemporary artists. But today it's not about that mainly. Today it's about Van Gogh and light, and more precisely, someone wants to come, so maybe Van Gogh and light, but Van Gogh and, as you said, Barbara, lights, because there are different lights that played out in his life and career. There's a southern light, northern light, southern light again. So, and all of that comes together. And for taking you through the lights and lives of Van Gogh, we divided the seminar into 4 chapters because we are 4 today. So I'm gonna introduce you briefly to the chapter of each of us before going into a more explanation of the foundation and the building that you can see on the first slide. So let me go to the second slide right now. Okay, so you have 4 images which illustrate each section, each chapter, and we will start today with Sarah, mediatrice at the foundation, who will take you through Van Gogh life and career, so to give you sort of milestones and very specific details of his life. And through that, we will understand already the idea of the northern, so lumière du nord, and southern light that played out in his career. And Margot will then talk about something actually very interesting take on the light, because we will see that it's above all a matter of labor, of work. So something that we will never, maybe we will not join together or associate together in the first place. Then Clémence will take you through more scientific details with the color theory of Chevreul, and also will take you through drawings of Van Gogh. We know Van Gogh for his paintings, but we know less of him with his drawings. And I will end the session by talking about heliotropisms and architecture also. Architecture, which I'm gonna talk about now again with the foundation. Okay, just to give you a bit of information about where we are. I mean, we are here at the Foundation, although it doesn't look like an exhibition space, it's an office space. So the foundation opened 2014. It's a fairly young foundation, fairly new foundation. It's privately funded. It's we call that private foundation for public utility, and it was funded by Luc Hoffman, who has a very strong link to Camargue. So we are in the south of France, we are in Camargue. The foundation, as you can see in this drawing done by Fluor, the architect, is located in the very center of the city and doesn't really go very high. You know, it's something that looks like a big building, and it was actually formerly the Banque de France. Already in the very first ideas of the designing of the building, since we had to rethink of the architecture of the Banque de France to host and welcome exhibitions, there were key elements that I'm going to tell you. And those elements, of course, are the lights, and how those lights have been sort of modulated and designed to give you an architecture that already responds to the sunlight and for different functions. So that's by night. So maybe you can see, if you look at my cursor here, that is the first part that you see by entering into the building, that's the bookshop. And this bookshop is the one that have the glass panels over there by an artist called Raphael Efti. And this is the first light that is transcribed into colors. It has been for the face of the foundation. So the bookshop is the face of the foundation. So it shows you with this installation called violet, blue, green, yellow, orange, red house. It already shows you what is at stake at the foundation. So colors, light, contemporary art to look at Van Gogh. This is another light which has been designed or sort of looked at for the architecture. So that's the piece by Raphael Efti. I can go back after and tell you more about this piece. It's very interesting. Okay, this one brings light to the exhibition space here. And this one is a sort of control in a manner that it can host exhibition, but also preserve the artwork that needs specific measurements. You know, we can't really show them under too much light, as you can imagine. This is another light that I'm not gonna talk about because I don't have a picture, but this is another one which is absolutely fantastic. And Florence, you know, because you've been at the foundation many times. And this is this one. When you go on our terraces, this is this sort of a bright, clear, strong light that you can have in summertime when you walk up on the terrace and you can admire. And this is this precise light that has kind of made Van Gogh absolutely, you know, passionate about also the light of the South. Again, those images of Raphael Efti, I can go back on that later. I think it's key to understand heliotropisms also, which I'm going to talk about later. Heliotropisms in the fact that the sun journey, the sun path across the day was studied in details to allow this kind of, as you see, cascade, waterfalls, not waterfalls, but like color falls that is in the bookshop. And when you go there, depending on the time of the day, you will see specific refractions of the light. As a way also to, you know, as I said, to welcome you in this palais de lumière, lumière transformée, transformed lighthouse. So I can go back to that later, but before we're gonna go through Van Gogh life, and I'm gonna leave you to Sarah for that.
Okay. So after this short introduction, I would like to present you a little bit this quest of light that Van Gogh had all along his artistic career through biographical elements in a chronological way. So I called this, I will show you up. So back, yeah, reminiscences, sorry, because it's a quest from the north to the south to the north again. So you have this idea of going back to the north. So Vincent van Gogh was born in 1853 in the Netherlands. He's from a wealthy family. His father was a Protestant pastor, so the religion is something very important all along his personal life. And when he started his career, he was 27 years old. It was in 1880. And he had already a very important, significant experience in the art world. Because first, he was an art dealer in the Goupil company, because his uncle Cor was an art dealer in this company first. So thanks to this uncle, he was impregnated by thousands of images, because this company was a company of paintings and prints selling. So he saw a lot of old and modern masters. During 7 years, when he did this job, he traveled a lot all around Europe, like in Amsterdam, but even in London, in Paris, in Brussels, etc. So he was very impregnated about art history already before this idea to become an artist. And this was just 7 years of his life, because after he had another mission. After the 7 years, he had this call to religion, and he wanted to preach to people in need. So he decided to go to the Borinage in Belgium, in a very poor area, full of coal mines, as you can see on the picture, and to preach and live lives like common people. So he started to draw at this period, and to do different examples of this daily life in this region. But he was very extreme in his life as an evangelist, as a preacher. So the church decided to stop his mission. So it was a big failure for him. And it was a very sad period just after this. But with the support of his beloved brother Theo, who was an art dealer too in the same company, Goupil company, he had another mission, because Theo told him to be an artist, because in the letters that they sent to each other, he did some sketches and some small drawings. And it was a good idea for Van Gogh to be saved, because it was a big salvation. And at 27, so it started his career. And when he started it, it was in the Netherlands, in The Hague, in a very dark light, not like in Arles after when he revealed himself. So he did a kind of self-taught lesson, because he copied the different manuals and books. And his first teacher was Anton Mauve, a cousin by marriage. So he had classical lessons, and he did this first oil painting with dark palette and very classical brushstrokes without any personal style. I don't think that you can guess that that was Van Gogh, because it looks like a lot of different other artists at the same period. But when he was in the Netherlands, he went after in the tent in the village of Nuenen, and he was more interested in the peasant world. So he started to paint the peasants and the workers, the weavers, and at the foundation we presented this kind of paintings, for example, with again this very dark palette, very classical brushstrokes, but powerful and expressive brushstrokes too. And we had last year a specific loan from the Amsterdam Museum, because every year we have this privilege to have an annual loan with the Van Gogh Museum of Amsterdam. And it was this painting, The Flying Fox, from 1884. He painted it in Nuenen. So you can see again this dark palette, but he used orange and yellow hues. So you can see this idea of transparency into the wings, because he already wanted to try to search something about light. And he had this idea of putting a candle behind the wings to have this impression of light. So already in the Netherlands at the first period, he did this kind of research about light. But he did another painting too at this period with Bible, with this still life, the year when he lost his father. So the Bible is a big symbol for him. And it's interesting because you have a very dark palette, again, with brown and black colors, but even some white hues to give some light, because he did some experiments about this idea of light and this idea of symbolic light, because you have again this candle, maybe it's a holy or spiritual light, we don't know, as an interpretation. And with this still life, he wrote a description to his brother Theo, speaking about the black hues that he used. And Theo said to Vincent that his paintings were too dark and gloomy, and invited him to come to Paris to use a brighter, lighter palette as Impressionists did at this period. So Vincent van Gogh decided in 1886 to go to Paris to join Theo, who was an influential art dealer in this period. And it was a big change for Vincent van Gogh. When he arrived in Paris, first, he went to museums, galleries. He admired, again, the old masters and modern masters they always admired. He saw, for example, Delacroix, that inspired him already in the Dutch period. And he met the avant-garde of the Impressionists. He went to the Fernand Comment studio, and it was a big change. For example, our actual lawn that we normally present in the exhibition is a nice example of this influence. You can see that the palette is brighter, and you can already see the brushstrokes are influenced by this Impressionist influence. And Paris is not just the Impressionism, is also Pointillism, because he went to Agnières, where Seurat and his friends went to, and you can see through this overpainting that we already presented in 2017, this influence with the brushstrokes, the lines, and the different kind of colors with the pinks, the green, the yellow, the blue, that transform already this Van Gogh's palette. And after this, you have, again, the contrast with different colors. For example, through there's flowers, you can see the use of red and green, of yellow and purple, or blue and orange, that are the complementary colors. And another influence, very, very important influence for Van Gogh at this period is Adolphe Monticelli. It's a French painter from Marseille, from the south of France. And Monticelli is famous because of his use of thick paint that we call the pastosity. He sculpts the matter with this thick paint and catch the light in a certain way. And it's very important for Vincent van Gogh because Monticelli is one of the reasons why he will go to the south of France just after. But there's not just Adolphe Monticelli for the reason to go to the south to search this southern light. There is again another influence. It's the Japanese culture, because Van Gogh already discovered Japanese prints when he was in Ambert at the beginning of his career, but when he was in Paris, he developed his collection. He was obsessed by Japanese culture, and he wanted to find his own Japan. He was exhausted by the Parisian life too. He wrote, is it okay? I heard something, but so he wrote, for example, in a letter to his brother that he was disgusted, really literally disgusted by the painters in Paris, and had to go to the south. And when he decided to go to the south, it was just for to go to the Monticelli steps to find his own Japan and to find this specific light in the south. So in 1888. The 20th of February, he arrived by train, so the train stopped, held up by the snow, and he wrote to his brother in a letter that you can see this quote here, you know, I feel I am in Japan. And he wrote it again to his sister. So this idea of being in Japan when he was in Arles is very, very important for him when he stayed there. He stayed for 15 months in Arles. It's one of his more productive periods. He did the main important paintings, masterpieces that you know, I think, today in this period in Arles. And the yellow became the translation of this light, because the yellow is the symbol of the sun, our heat, and he did a contrast with the blue too, because you have a signature for Van Gogh in Arles. The yellow is the sun, the blue is the sky, and it's something that he developed a lot in this period, but always remembering this light of the north. For example, you have another quote here about this idea of remembering the northern light even when he was in the south. And he did this he wrote this other quote too, expressing that he needed to go to the south because it was physically something very important for him to stay in the south of France too. To continue with the period in Arles, there is another quest. It's the quest of the nocturnal light. For example, here you have a portrait. It's the first example where he used this idea of the nocturnal light with the use of stars in the sky. So with a very dark blue and the lightly stars. So this is the first portrait, but after he developed it with the terrace by night and of course the famous Starry Night over the Rhône, and the even more famous Starry Night that he will do after in Saint-Rémy de Provence. And he was fascinated by this idea of nocturnal and daily light. And he developed another thing when he was in Arles, this idea of Atelier du Midi, the southern studio. He invited Gauguin to come. He was the only one who came to see him, but we know that the end was not very good. So Van Gogh had different nervous breakdowns, and he decided to go to Saint-Rémy de Provence in an asylum, where he continued to develop this quest of light. And for example, he did this kind of very dark skies, going back to the dark palette, but showing again this idea of trouble, mental troubles. So you can see here that you have movements too. In Saint-Rémy, he had another period of nostalgia with this idea of reinterpretation of Jean-François Millet. Millet, that was one of his idols. He called it his father, his other father. So here it's not just a copy, it's really a reinterpretation, because you can see again this idea of blue and yellow and very personal kind of new brushstrokes again. And after he had, at the end of his stay in Saint-Rémy, this idea of reminiscences of Brabant, his native region, with again a specific light, but specific patterns too, with the Dutch cottages that he developed. Because he was indoors, he couldn't go outside because of his nervous breakdowns. And when he wanted to continue to develop this style, he had these memories and did this kind of paintings. After Saint-Rémy de Provence, after 1 year in Saint-Rémy de Provence, he decided to finish his life in Auvers-sur-Oise at the north of Paris. So he went back to the north, developing again this idea of Dutch pattern with again houses like in Brabant. But you can see on a picture that in the sky, to put some light, he did this technique of non-finito. It means that he didn't put the paint all over the canvas. And with this other example, you can see that the brushstrokes were more abstract, separated, and gave some over impression of light. In Auvers-sur-Oise, there is another important, significant example. It's this church, this very famous church, where you can see three kinds of light, because he was very free in the composition, but even in the use of light. For example, at the bottom, you can see that it was maybe at noon when he painted it. With the shadow and the church, it's at the end of the day, but in the sky, it's again by night. So he mixed three kinds of light in the same painting, and it's again a very symbolic subject, because we are with the church, and that recalls us this idea of his mission, that he had to be a member of the clergy first. That was a failure again. And to finish with Auvers-sur-Oise, he developed another thing. It's the panoramic format. So you can see that here in the sky with the light, it could develop the different lights that he saw in this region, with a stormy, cloudy, or sunny light again. And to finish with Auvers-sur-Oise and the Van Gogh's life, you have this official last painting he did with the three roots, where you can see that he developed different hues of green, blue, brown, yellow, but again with this idea of black lines surrounding the roots, because he was impregnated by the Japanese prince too. So it's a kind of mix of his different searches about light. And he opened a new way to the next setup of artists. And he died at 37 years old on 29 July of 1890. And that it's interesting is that ironically, he passed from shadow to light, but after his death. Thank you for your attention. And we continue with Margot.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. So the next chapter will be about Van Gogh and the light, a matter of work. So if you have been lucky to travel to France, and more specifically to Provence, you can easily remember the sweetness of summer evenings and its reassuring lights. All these delicious sensations are idealized and superficial sensations of an arid and dry territory. The personal experience of Provence is for Van Gogh an experience under tension. During this stay, he is not trying to represent light, but to transform light into colors. It is a physical and painful experience. The light for Van Gogh is not related to the notion of free time and tourism, but it is a call to order, an injunction to work outside, like a peasant, like a sower. The question of light in painting is not a new discussion topic during Van Gogh's time. Already at the end of the 18th century, the art world knows a crisis of landscape representation. The famous French author Chateaubriand is writing in 1795, I quote, "The students must first of all take care of the study of nature itself. It is in the middle of the countryside that they must take their first lessons." The tone is set, and the future painter must have experienced the nature and its sensations. The first painter of this time who is trying to experience landscape and light is Camille Corot. It is important to know that at this time, the famous painting prize Prix de Rome is not taking in consideration landscapes painting. And the only landscape which are represented are about religious or mythological scenes. The light is totally artificial and helps only to give a perfect and idealized representation of an unreal vision. We know two versions of painting of Pont de Narny by Camille Corot. The final painting that you can see, this is the second one, and the old sketch, which is the first one. You can see in the slide. And it is the sketch which is particularly interesting for us because it was painting outside in front of the pattern. It was done during the first travel to the artist to Italy in 1826, who was already trying to capture the light of the south. Camille Corot used to give an extraordinary importance to these outside works and would say, "It is necessary to be faithful." They are the premise of a mix between the academic painting and the outside work whose Corot will be the pioneer. He settled the silencious revolution where the light is digging the landscapes more and more. In the meanwhile, other trends in painting are appearing, but they all maintain a certain distance between the real and the representation of light and the experimentation of colors. The masters of Barbizon are painting after memories. Oh, not after, sorry. So the masters of Barbizon are painting after memories and not over pattern, even if they spend their life in middle of nature. They are close to a movement called the pleinarism, developed all over Europe until United States. And this movement is trying to represent some light effects, but without a real print of the wheel and of the sensations. Theodore Rousseau's paintings are still idealized and looking for utopic vision of nature, preserved and living an autonomous life without human presence. On the other side, the realism with the famous Gustave Courbet is delivering a flat painting where the texture and the sensation of light is less important than the veracity of faces and attitudes. Landscapes for the realist painters appeared only as a pretext to organize prestigious scenes close to history paintings. Concerning the old master of Barbizon school, before becoming the spiritual father of Impressionism, they remain direct heirs of the last Romanticism. However, there is an intellectual and cultural screen between them and nature. We have to wait for the Impressionism, with the Impressionists and the Neo-Impressionists, to admire the first representation of light with a certain consideration of sensations and physical human conditions in middle of nature and cities. Just after my presentation, Clémence will explain all the research and development of scientific theories related to these paintings movements. But what we can keep in mind, it's the general atmosphere who is welcoming Van Gogh when he arrived in Paris. On one side, there is a painting guided by sensation and search of neutrality, the Impressionists, and on the other side, the strict application of scientific discoveries applied to more bourgeois subjects with the Neo-Impressionists. It is probably too much for Vincent, who decided to leave the French capital for the South in February 1898. Even if he doesn't know precisely what he's looking for, the influence of light of South on his painting is a certitude for him. Few months before he's left, his brother bought 6 paintings of the famous Marseille painter Monticelli, as I explained Sarah, and maybe it was a strong influence for him, more for the colors than the light. And we know also, because Sarah has explained very well, the influence and the research of the Japanese light for Van Gogh. In Provence, all the research of Vincent are articulated around the light, but more precisely, how to transform light into colors. All his perceptions are answering to colors. I quote, "At the moment, we have a very glorious, powerful heat here, with no wind, which suits me very well. Sunshine, a light which, for want of a better word, I can only call yellow. Pale sulfur yellow, pale lemon, gold. How beautiful yellow is, and how much better shall I see the north. I'm always wishing that the day will come when you will see and feel the sun of the south." This is a quote from a letter to Theo in 1888. All the elements of the nature and the real are translated into colors for Van Gogh. But the research of light and the transformation of it into colors is not an easy job, and Van Gogh is fighting with his work. Most of his work sessions are in the middle of fields, face to face with the Mistral and the sun. He's experiencing physically the nature and the landscape. He is embodied physically into the landscapes. He is becoming a walker of painting, similar to a peasant who is walking laboring. The light of the night, of the stars, and of the oil lamps are as important as the light of the sun and the dance of the shadows. The work of light in Van Gogh paintings is less a search linked to art history than a quest for a spiritual discovery. The sunlight into these paintings are not only beautiful and strange, the sparkling of the stars are not only a call to a certain vision of romanticism. The lights and the colors in Van Gogh paintings are the result of a relentless work, of a fight with the real, of a deal with his perceptions and his personal crisis. The sun is hard, the sun is everywhere, The sun is like a spiritual presence and burned the skin of the painter from the north. The hairs of Van Gogh are divided, sorry, I missed this slide, sorry. But so we speak about the heritage, and the hairs of Van Gogh are divided in two groups. On one side, there are the symbolists with Gustave Moreau, Odilon Redon, or Puvis de Chavannes. And these artists decide to focus on their interior life and play with the symbolic of the world. They want to renew the aesthetic of pictorial art and choose new ideals and images. They realize a lot of landscapes as a mix between reality and fiction. It oscillates between astrology and psychology. They were more interested with Van Gogh, with Vincent and his interior life than Van Gogh and his technical research. The first catalogue, published after one of the first exhibitions of Van Gogh, is definitely influenced by the symbolist. So it was realized in 1992, and this is the cover of this catalogue. Then, concerning the technical heritage of Van Gogh, the Fauvism, are probably the most direct hairs. The group, composed by Derain, Matisse, and Vlaminck, are obsessed with colors. There is an interested extract from a letter of Derain to Vlaminck dated of 28th July 1905. I quote, "I take advantage of the rain to write you, because usually it makes a radiant sun that despairs me by its way of increasing my synthetic difficulties and complicating my acrobatic exercise about light. I let myself go to color for color. The Fauve will not translate the light into colors. They will transform all their reality into a festival of red, yellow, blue, and green. They are also obsessed with the Mediterranean light and travel to Marseille, Provence, and of course, Collioure. But there is probably a fundamental difference between them and Van Gogh, because most of the paintings realized by Matisse and Derain during their stay in Collioure are done since their apartments. And the real is depicted through a window, as you can notice on the painting. So all the real is depicted through a window and not in the middle of nature anymore. The light is captured, but the light doesn't burn anyone anymore. If Vincent van Gogh has developed an extraordinary practice to catch the light and transform it in colors, his relation to light is inseparable to a certain vision of existentialism. If the sun could be related to a spiritual symbolic, it is also directly related to the notion of work. It is probably for this reason that we used to call Vincent van Gogh l'illuminé. In French, illuminé is an adjective to define someone who has a certain extreme relation to God, to spirituality. But that means also someone touched by the grace, someone who can feel the light. Thank you very much. This is now Clément's presentation.
Ladies, good evening. As Margot told you, I'm going to approach the light in a more scientific way. First of all, it's important to understand when and how light was studied. Then what this has meant for the approach of light in art history. So let's start by talking about the discovery of the spectrum of light. In 1665, Father Francesco Maria Grimaldi, an Italian Jesuit, carried out a simple experiment in which light entered a dark room through a slit and projected the light beam onto a white screen. Sorry. The aim was to check whether the width of the project beam corresponded to that predicted by the geometric trace of the light beam. To his great surprise, Grimaldi found that the light beam is wider on the screen. Moreover, the white light doesn't appear white, but colored with 2 or 3 stripes of different colors. He called the phenomenon diffraction, a term that is still used today. And in 1666, Isaac Newton past white sunlight through a prism to break it down into rays of light of different colors. Newton understood that white light is made of a mixture of light rays of different colors. This spread of light rays ranging from red to violet, like the colors of the rainbow, is called light spectrum. The light spectrum is made of 6 colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet, and always in the same order. This discovery of the composition of light led to a great deal of research on the discoveries about colors, including that the 3 primary colors of light are red, green, and blue. When these rays of light are superimposed, we obtain the secondary colors yellow, cyan, and magenta, the 3 primary colors in paintings. Indeed, colors don't work in the same way if you are a scientist or if you are an artist. If we mix the primary colors of light, we get white light, and while if we mix the primary colors in paint, we get gray, black colors. Oops, sorry. Okay. The French chemist Michel-Eugène Chevreul will be interested in color perception. He wrote in 1839 on the law of simultaneous colors contrast and assortment of objects. He demonstrated that the eye has a natural tendency to merge colors that are close to each other. The mixing is done by simple perception. Our eyes undergoes what is called an optical effect. The colors influence each other and deceive our perception. Shows that a color influences a neighboring colors. The same tone seems lighter if it is on a darker background, and complementary colors make each other more vivid, and non-complementary colors move away in tone. And he invented the chromatic circle, as you can see in the slide. The work of the French chemist Chevreul influenced major artistic schools such as Impressionism, Neo-Impressionism, and Orphic Cubism. Okay. The Impressionists and especially the Pointillists were very good at putting this theory into practice, not by mixing color on the palette, but by simple juxtaposition strokes on the support. An area which appears purplish with distance is in fact a juxtaposition of a multitude of small red and blue dots. This phenomenon is called optical mixing. In France, from the 1820s onwards, some Parisian artists felt the desire to walk in the open air. They went to the forest of Fontainebleau in the village of Barbizon. This is where the Barbizon school was born. These landscape painters are the first to wish to capture live daylight. The invention of the paint tube in 1841 made their approach easier. And the Impressionists were in direct line with the school, but they turned the subject of modern life, such as Monet Station, the first painting on this slide. Some of them no longer seek to copy nature, but the Impressionists, some of them no longer seek to copy nature, but to translate the emotions it's inspiring them. They seek to capture the light at a specific time and the impressions left by the landscape and its atmosphere. Their touch is therefore often quick and not very detailed. It is often necessary to step back from the canvas to see the pattern because the brushstrokes are so present. Impressionism would have been born in 1873 following Claude Monet's paintings Impression Soleil Levant. Following the Chevreul research, the Impressionists banned black and pure white replacing these two extremes with either very light or very dark colors. And the Pointillists apply Schurer's theories to retranscribe the effect of light as well as possible. Georges Seurat and Paul Signac were the founders of the technique, which was based on the Impressionist technique. Also known as Neo-Impressionism or Divisionism, Pointillist is a technique based on the ability to the eyes and the mind of the spectator to melt the patches of colors into a full range of tones. The aim is to reveal the light and make the colors more vivid. Seurat's paintings Dimanche après-midi à l'île de la Grande Jatte, exhibited in 1886, is a clear example of this. And Paul Signac landscapes deserve to be looked at attentively. The juxtaposition of the touches of colors gives a vibrant aspect and truly animates the paintings. And Van Gogh in all of this. If Van Gogh's paintings is so ingenious, it is well because he learned from his peers. The scientific discoveries and pictorial techniques discovered in Paris radically changed his style, but one element remains very important in the light of the Dutch master's canvases. Beyond learning how to handle colors, the brushstrokes is just as important, and it is born from his studies of drawing. The energy to quivering, but also the brightness and luminosity come from his drawings. Pencil, charcoal, feather, calamus, all techniques are used. During its stay in The Hague and the Drent, Van Gogh, inspired by English models, wanted to obtain a great expressive force of using shades of black and grays. For this, he didn't hesitate to use the graphite and milk, which dilute the graphite and velvety black. But it is the discovery of the cut reed that constitutes a radical turning point in his work. His variety of gesture, line, curves, dotted, would never have been revealed without his studies alongside the Parisian Pointillists and Japanese prints. This Japanese technique was brilliantly developed in Arles after his stay at Sainte-Marie-de-la-Mer. The work of the seascapes gave him confidence in his gesture. And Van Gogh said to his brother Theo, the Japanese draws quickly, very quickly, like a lightning bolt. His nerves are finer, his feeling is simple. His study of Le Zouave, or his drawing at Montmajour, reveal his understanding and mastery of the technique. His compositions are harmonious and thoughtful. The variety and the virtuosity of his gesture in the drawing will be reused in the painting, which makes it the revealer of the light. So, Julia, it's your turn.
Okay, I think we're a bit behind schedule, so I'm gonna be quick, but I'm gonna try to be as clear as I can. And at the time we are speaking, the sky is becoming darker, so it's a good time to talk about heliotropisms, which is something I borrow from a book by Emanuele Coscia, which I will explain you shortly after. So heliotropisms, as you know, is something that describes how a plant specifically tracks the sun movement across the sky to enhance photosynthesis. So it's a directional response to the sun, and it implies motion. And when we first think about heliotropisms, what first come to mind is sunflowers, or are sunflowers. And those are key to Van Gogh, as you may have in mind specific paintings by him representing sunflowers. But these other paintings I want to talk to you about because there is specific aspect of heliotropism that I want to share with you today. But before going to the study of the painting and to look at philosophical point of view on heliotropisms, I would love to go back on two specific examples, one of which being Tournesol coloré that you can see on the screen. So it's a film strip, what you can see. So the film, 16mm film by Rose Loder was projected at the Foundation this summer. It's actually something mesmerizing because the solar tracking movement is composing the filmic motif. This really little time for us to go through that. Again, I made a little text and description of this architecture called heliotrope that was made in the 90s in Germany. But maybe I go straight to the point because time is running. So, and this, as I said, very appealing aspect of heliotropism that I would love to share with you, and that is actually linked to the idea of landscape, and more precisely towards the landscape as a certain economy of light. And I mentioned earlier, and I showed you this book, this essay that was published by us as a foundation a few months ago, and that was actually made in response to a painting that we had, this one, the Sower, Le Semeur au coucher du soleil, the Sower at sunset, from the Burley collection in Switzerland. And the philosopher Emanuele Coscia described very specific things in relation to this painting, and it brings us to understand heliotropisms in relation to landscape painting, in which nature not only is depicted, but as Margot says, is fully experienced on a non-transcendental level. So the nature as an experience, but from which we are part of. And to follow this line of thoughts, I'm gonna take you through the expose of Emanuele Coscia, and we will look at the paintings at the same time. This painting, which has, I quote, an immense lemon yellow disc. This is what Van Gogh said about his painting, and this is what he said also by preparing this painting with the sketch. And it's very interesting when you look at the sketch, because there are three components here: the tree, the sun, and the sower. And if you look at the sower, the hand of the sower in the sketch, you understand how important is the act of sowing in this painting which has, let's say, three main characters, the sun being one of them. This lemon yellow disc is one of the characters, and it's actually the main one. And why is it the main character? Sorry, it's because actually from this painting, from the sun, everything is organized. And everything is organized and everything is transformed into a landscape. When I say everything, Coscia will say painting, with painting, the world is becoming a landscape. In other words, the sower is becoming earth. The sower is painted the same way than the earth. The sower is equal to the tree. Not that they are the same colors, although he said that he would paint them the same colors. The sower and the tree will be in Prussian blue, but it means that they may be a part of the same world, of the same landscape. And this is something that Van Gogh picked up from Jean-François Millet also, when the earth that constitutes the planet is also constituting the sower. And they are kind of grouped together as a nature because they're both, I mean, all those elements, the trees, the soil, the earth, the land, the fields, are subjected to the sunlight, are subjected to the light, which is not the condition of visibility, and I'm quoting Emanuele Coscia, but is a condition of life for every living thing. This is where we, come back to the idea of why the trees and the seeds are kind of connected to the soil. So if the plant tracks the light to enhance photosynthesis in a process of creating food from light, the sower, so the summer, is also tracking the light, also managing the sun energy for the seeds is sowing. So in a way, they're capturing the light, redistributing the light, and all of this come from the sun. And this is something that Emanuele Coscia was a key to emphasize, that to understand planting and sowing, we need to start from the sun. So here we are back again in the painting with this lemon yellow disc that is actually oversized and sharing a space with a tree and a soil that is actually giving life to. And it makes us think that life on Earth, or actually agriculture, has its sources from an extraterrestrial space. So agriculture and sowing has its sources in, another worldly space, which actually is the sun. So you can see my funny slides, which show you this kind of sci-fi take on agriculture. So sowing is a form of lighting. Sowing is a form of distribution of the light, of the terrestrial light into the terrestrial space, into the earth. So when you look at the tree, it contains this molecule of light. It contains the light that is actually at the center of composition of the painting. And to conclude and to make it short, I hope you followed me in this kind of line of thoughts, which are special and kind of very speculative take on agriculture and sowing and the sun and the landscape and landscape painting. Just to make a quick conclusion for that, Van Gogh, in placing so much vision into the figure of the sower, understood not only that sowing is already an act of distribution, of distributing the light, but is actually very similar to the act of painting, because both of them have a desire to refashion the world on the basis of the light. So paintings and sowing, and Van Gogh being like manna from the earth, being someone close to the peasants, actually brings another understanding of light as something that has to do with redistribution, giving life, circulating the life. So heliotropism in that aspect is linked to sowing, and make us also think and rethink about this in relation to fixed image and not only moving images. This is also one of the key elements I wanted to bring and share with you tonight before we conclude. That's it for me. Are you here, Barbara?
Yeah, I'm here, Julia. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, ladies.
Because I know you may have questions, and we try to bring you different aspects of Van Gogh, and we finish with this sort of take on heliotropisms. But if we have questions, we are here to answer.
Actually, I don't see any questions, so I think everything is very clear for everyone. I would like to share with you an image. This image, I don't know if you can see it properly. It's Dominique Jensen's from Auvers-sur-Oise, and it's the photography of the roots, which is the last painting that was the last painting that Vincent van Gogh did. And so, as you know, they found recently which tree, which was, voila. Can you put the image? Yeah, exactly. So this is the tree that he used. So it was a fantastic discovery that they made recently. And now there is a book about that, because we know that Vincent van Gogh died, unfortunately, a few hours after finishing this last painting. So well, I wanted to share with you this photography.
Yes, thank you for bringing it. It's so fascinating because the trees is already these paintings, and when you look at the photo, it's actually showing us how abstract Van Gogh was as well as an abstract painter. You know, he's like landscape painter, abstract painter. He kind of is a pioneer of so many styles that came after him.
Yes, absolutely, because at the beginning they didn't know it was roots. So it's exactly like you said, so abstract that we could imagine anything else that could be.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, ladies, for sharing with us your knowledge, your passion. It was very, very interesting. Today we have learned how art history can be retraced using light. And I think that a trip to Arles and the Fondation Vincent Van Gogh are must have on our future trips list. Thank you so much, Julia, Margot, Sarah, and Clémence for this fantastic insight. And please, everyone, do not hesitate to follow our website and Instagram, theartcircle.ae, where you will find the replays of our webinar and all information about what we do. On behalf of the Art Circle board, I would like to thank again the Fondation Van Gogh Arles team and all of you for attending our webinar tonight. Stay safe, stay tuned, and see you soon.
Bye-bye, everyone. Au revoir.